It was a Tuesday, unremarkable, humid, filled with errands and emails I didn't want to answer. I had just put away groceries, the scent of fresh basil still on my hands, when I noticed an odd email from my husband's calendar. He'd accidentally synced a few of his work notifications to my phone during a weekend. He tried to organize our tech. A dinner reservation popped up. Asteria Mariotti. 7:30 p.m. Dinner with Elise. My first thought wasn't betrayal. It was confusion. I didn't know an Elise. I couldn't recall him mentioning one either. But the name stayed with me. Elise. Intimate. Not businesslike. And not at a restaurant that screamed client dinner. It screamed something else entirely. I checked the email details. This wasn't a one-time reservation. It was a recurring calendar entry every other Friday night for the past 2 years. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel the sting of tears. Instead, I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and began a quiet investigation. 2 hours later, I had more answers than I knew what to do with. Photos from public social media accounts, credit card receipts, shared Airbnb bookings, and a wedding announcement from 2 years ago in a small-town publication. Him, in the same tailored navy suit he wore to our anniversary dinner, only this time standing next to a different woman in a sleeveless lace gown. Elise. I had known him for a decade. We'd been married for 8 years. And apparently for 2 of those years he had been living a double life. He wasn't careless. He was calculated. Separate bank accounts. Different addresses. A schedule that rotated between client retreats and family obligations. And I had believed him. Every single time. I spent the next 10 days playing the role of the oblivious wife. I kissed him goodbye at the door. I asked about his day. I even made his favorite risotto. And every night after he fell asleep I documented. Not just for court but for truth. I made a timeline. I printed out receipts. I listed every lie I could remember and matched it to its real location, real woman, real night. Then I found her. Elise was lovely. Her social media was full of baking, golden retrievers, soft sweaters, and filtered light. She didn't know about me. I could tell by the way she posted, unapologetically proud of her husband. She even thanked him publicly on their 2nd anniversary. A post dated the same week he told me he was sick and stayed at a hotel to avoid getting me sick. I drafted a message. Clean. Direct. You don't know me, but we share a husband. I would like to invite you to dinner. She responded with 3 words. Where and when? I planned it carefully. The restaurant was upscale, intimate, the kind of place where every movement echoed. I reserved a private room and requested a round table. 3 seats, no corners to hide behind. I wrote place cards in perfect calligraphy. 1 for me, 1 for him, 1 for Elise. I dressed in red. Not fiery red. Not romantic red. Blood red. The kind that absorbs the light around it. My hair was pinned up. Lips painted sharp. I arrived early. Set the table myself. He came in right on time, punctual as ever. Kissed my cheek. Told me I looked beautiful. Happy anniversary, I said softly. He smiled. And then Elise walked in. The moment stretched. His face contorted slowly, as if his brain couldn't process the overlap. Elise didn't say a word. She simply walked to her seat, calm, composed. We both looked at him, and in unison said, "Happy anniversary." The silence that followed was not awkward. It was surgical. He opened his mouth. I raised a hand. "Don't. Just sit." He did. I pulled an envelope from my purse and placed it beside his plate. Everything you need to know is inside. Financial disclosures. A divorce petition. Photocopies of your hotel stays. She's filing for annulment. Mine's already in motion. His hands trembled. The first course arrived. We ate. He didn't. The dinner was done. No screaming, no chaos. Just the quiet precision of 2 women placing truth in front of a man who'd built a life on lies. He left the restaurant speechless, face pale and eyes darting like a man realizing there was no exit. Elise and I didn't hug, didn't cry. We nodded once, like veterans parting after a battle. No need for words. We'd already said everything that mattered. The next morning the text started. First from him, vague, desperate apologies. Please talk to me. It's not what it looks like. We can fix this. The classic repertoire of a man who thinks charm still works after the curtain has fallen. I didn't respond. He'd had 2 years to speak honestly. His silence back then had been his answer. By the end of the week the tone shifted. The messages turned sour. Accusatory. You ambushed me. You embarrassed me. You've ruined everything. I archived each one and forwarded them to my lawyer. Let them become evidence. Let them become his biography. Mara, my divorce attorney, was a hurricane in heels. Immaculately dressed, unreadable eyes, and a legal mind honed for bloodless victories. She flipped through the folder I'd brought her, thick with receipts, screenshots, and side-by-side photos of our overlapping lives. This, she said, tapping one of the timeline charts, is not just infidelity. This is marital fraud. You've got him nailed. We filed under grounds of intentional deception and emotional cruelty. In our state, that still meant something. Elise, for her part, filed for annulment. Legally, her marriage was invalid. Emotionally, it was a slow-motion car crash. We spoke now and then, short texts, brief updates, quiet solidarity. We didn't become friends, not quite. But we were sisters in survival, bound by the wreckage he left behind. He lawyered up quickly, of course, tried to negotiate, tried to delay, but every path he took was already sealed shut. I had been thorough. I knew his accounts, the secret savings he funneled to a shadow account under a shell corporation. The car I never knew he leased. The apartment Elise had thought was their home, but was listed under a corporate name I traced back to a P.O. box. I didn't want everything. Just enough to make sure he couldn't walk away clean. The financial mediation meetings were icy affairs. He sat across the table from me, flanked by a lawyer who looked increasingly uncomfortable with each document we presented. Mara laid it out clinically. He had knowingly maintained 2 separate marital relationships, used shared funds for personal deception, and falsified tax returns in the process. The settlement I requested wasn't vindictive. It was forensic. Still, he tried to play victim. His lawyer actually used the word emotional confusion at one point. I almost laughed. We reached an agreement within 3 weeks. He forfeited his share of the house. I got the investments. He kept the leased car, probably because that's where his remaining pride lived. The judge reviewed the case in 30 minutes, barely asked questions. He knew a calculated fraud when he saw one. But the courtroom wasn't where the real reckoning happened. It was in the slow, social collapse that followed. Our friends, the couples we dined with, the neighbors who waved at our lawn, began to distance themselves. Not from me, from him. Invitations dried up. Client cancelled. His name was quietly removed from a local board of directors. Word spreads fast in circles that rely on image, and he no longer had one worth protecting. One afternoon, a former colleague of his stopped me in the wine aisle of a high-end grocery store. He lowered his voice. "You didn't deserve any of that," he said. "Everyone knows what he did. No one's buying his version." I smiled, thanked him, and walked away. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks quietly in heels and lets the world come to its own conclusions. By the end of the summer, his reputation wasn't ruined. It was erased. And mine? It was just getting started. Freedom didn't arrive with fanfare. It came on a Tuesday, just like the destruction. I woke up, brewed my coffee, and realized the air felt light. No dread in my chest. No calendar blocked by court dates or bank meetings. No surveillance of his movements. The war was over. And I had won. Not because I destroyed him, but because I outgrew him. I moved into a downtown loft. exposed beams, concrete floors, and a wall of glass that let the city pour in like electricity. There was no clutter, no echo of the life I'd left. I brought only what mattered. My books, my records, a set of wine glasses, and one framed photo from before everything fractured. Me alone, smiling on a balcony in Seville. It reminded me that I had existed before him. I still did. I didn't decorate hastily. Each piece I added felt like a declaration. A crimson velvet chair near the window. A reclaimed wood table, rough and honest. No framed wedding photos. No shared artifacts. Every corner of the apartment spoke only my name. I began walking in the mornings. Early, before the streets filled. I'd pass bakeries warming up, cafes unlocking doors. Something about that hour, the city stretching itself awake, made me feel aligned. For once, I didn't feel behind or broken. I felt ahead. It was during one of those walks I discovered the gallery. Small, unassuming, tucked between a flower shop and a tailor. A sculpture in the window caught my eye, a woman's face, cracked straight down the middle, filled with golden resin. I stared at it for too long. When I finally went inside, I met Clara, the owner. Sharp eyes, steel posture, silk scarf tied like a signature. She watched me examining the sculpture and said, "You don't need to fix the crack. Just light it from within." We talked, then talked again. She invited me to a small salon she hosted every month. Women only, no husbands, no networking, just conversation. It was there I realized how many versions of me existed inside other women's stories. That was where my writing began. First, just in notebooks. Then a blog. Then an anonymous column. I called it Second Wife, First Life. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. Essays about identity, about women who kept the receipts, about dignity in the aftermath of lies. I told pieces of my story without names, without blood. The response was instant. Women sent messages like prayers, "You're telling my story. This saved me. How did you survive this and stay calm?" I didn't stay calm. I just didn't waste my fire on noise. Clara offered me gallery space for a reading. 30 people came, then 50. One night Elise walked in. She didn't say anything at first, just listened. Afterward she pulled me aside. "You turned it into something." I barely got out. I nodded. Getting out is enough. Turning it into something is optional. We spoke like that sometimes, sparingly but without residue. No bitterness. We'd both outgrown the man who tried to own us. The legal settlement matured quietly. Money moved into new accounts. I bought shares in a publishing company that specialized in women's narratives. The irony? They later rejected a book pitch from a man who shared my ex's name. Too derivative, they said. Justice doesn't always show up in the courtroom. Sometimes it shows up in rejections, in silence, in being edited out of someone else's victory. By fall, I was unrecognizable to the version of myself who once packed his suitcases, scribbled notes in his lunchbox, believed Thursday nights really belonged to spreadsheets. Now Thursday nights were mine. And they were exquisite. By autumn, my life had taken on a rhythm that no longer had space for him. Not in thought, not in shadow. I wasn't healing, I was creating. The blog had gone from anonymous essays to published features. A small team helped manage submissions from women around the world. Stories like mine, worse than mine, braver than mine. The city noticed. An event organizer reached out in November. They were hosting a panel, Women Rebuilding After Ruin. Would I speak? At first, I hesitated. I had spoken anonymously for so long that stepping into the light felt dangerous. But Clara said something that stuck. "You don't owe him your silence." So I said yes. The event was modest, held in an industrial-style arts building with iron staircases and brick walls lit by amber lights. The audience filled quickly, mostly women, a few men, all faces turned upward as if waiting to inhale the moment. I stood backstage, heart calm, wearing black silk and the gold necklace I bought for myself when the divorce finalized. I opened with a single sentence. My story isn't about betrayal. It's about what you do after. The room leaned in. I didn't name names. I didn't mention the dinner. But I told the truth in outline. A double life discovered by accident. A woman who chose calm over chaos, dignity over spectacle. I described how I documented the lies, how I set the table, how I walked away. And then I spoke of the work, building a life that wasn't about survival, but sovereignty. When I finished, the room was quiet. Not stunned. Moved. Then the applause started. First polite, then rising like a tide. I bowed my head slightly, the way a woman does when she knows she's won something more important than applause. That's when I saw him. 2 rows from the back, leaning slightly forward. Face thinner, suit a bit looser. He hadn't been invited, but he came anyway. Of course he did. Men like him can't resist watching the women they underestimated become headlines. He was trying to measure something with his eyes. Maybe whether I was still angry. Maybe if I missed him. Or maybe just wondering when exactly I'd stop needing anything from him at all. I didn't look away. I met his gaze and held it for just long enough. Then I turned my eyes to the next woman in line to speak. After the panel, a few attendees stayed back to chat. I answered questions, signed a few books, posed for photos. But I was watching the exit the whole time. He didn't approach me. He just left. Good. The next day, the panel was written up in 2 online publications. One called me an architect of elegance under pressure. The other said, her story shows that sometimes revenge doesn't need volume. It just needs clarity. Weeks passed. Then came the gala. An invitation arrived in the mail, thick envelope, calligraphy on the front. It was the same organization that once honored him for business leadership. This time they were honoring me. For literary advocacy. For founding a platform that gave women space to tell their stories. I didn't hesitate. I wore red again, this time velvet, deep and clean. Not revenge red. Victory red. The event was held in a glass atrium. Chandeliers floating above like stars. I walked in alone. I wasn't a wife. I wasn't a +1. I was the name on the plaque. A man approached me before the ceremony. Familiar face, former colleague of his. He smiled politely. I heard what happened, he said. You made something remarkable out of it. I nodded. He underestimated the value of telling the truth. The room quieted for the awards. I accepted mine with brief words. I was once silenced by betrayal. I turned it into a microphone. The applause was warm, respectful, real. I saw no sign of him. But I knew he knew. Because when power shifts, it echoes. And he would feel it. Freedom didn't come with thunder. It came with a quiet Tuesday morning. And a black coffee I brewed exactly the way I liked it. I sat on the windowsill of my apartment, barefoot, robe loosely tied, watching the city stir awake. I hadn't thought about him in days. Weeks maybe. I couldn't remember the last time his name lived on my tongue. That was the freedom. By then, the blog had become a platform. Second Wife, First Life now featured dozens of writers. Women sharing what it meant to survive, to rebuild, to choose calm instead of collapse. We partnered with therapists, attorneys, even financial advisors who understood the unique storm of betrayal and recovery. I didn't talk about him anymore. Only what came after. I lived alone. And I liked it. Not in a lonely way. In a complete way. Every corner of my apartment was mine. No trace of his cologne in the closet. No toothbrush that wasn't mine. No extra keys. My mornings were slow and deliberate. My nights full of books, soft music, and silence that felt like silk. Sometimes people asked if I was dating again. No, I'd answer. I'm not looking for someone. I'm building something. I wasn't anti-love. I just no longer needed it to feel full. Then one Sunday I saw him again. I was standing in line at a bookstore cafe, ordering a croissant and espresso. He was behind me. Hair a little thinner, suit wrinkled, eyes darting before he recognized me. He said my name. I turned, looked at him for a second. He gave me a small smile. You look happy. I nodded. I am. He paused, hands shoved into his pockets like he was trying to disappear into himself. I saw you on that panel. You were amazing. I know. A beat passed. I thought maybe someday, he started, but didn't finish. I saved him the embarrassment. Someday, you'll realize you were lucky I didn't destroy you. He nodded slowly, eyes low. You didn't just lose me, I added. You lost access to a future you didn't deserve. I walked away without waiting for a response. He didn't follow. Later that week, I threw away the mug I'd been using for years, one he'd given me early in our marriage. It had survived the divorce, the move, the reinvention. But that day, I realized it wasn't part of the new story. It didn't deserve to be. The final traces of him vanished without ceremony. Months passed. Then years. The platform grew. I published a memoir. Not about him, but about the architecture of betrayal and the dignity of rebuilding. It hit a bestseller list. I didn't do a book tour. I hosted intimate readings in cities where women told me, quietly, you gave me a language I didn't have. I never saw him again. Sometimes people still bring him up. Mutual acquaintances, old colleagues. Whatever happened to him? They ask. I'm not sure, I reply. I stopped tracking ghosts. Because that's what he became in the end. A shadow with no weight. A lesson with no sequel. And me? I became the woman who sent an invitation, not to destroy, but to reveal. Who didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't break. I planned the dinner. I served the silence. I built a life so far beyond him. He can't even see the horizon. I never needed revenge. I just needed the last word. And I made sure it was mine. Some stories end in silence. Others end in fire. If you crave the thrill of betrayal exposed, justice delivered, whether whispered or screamed, subscribe. These aren't just stories. They're warnings. And the next revenge might be louder than you think.